Hello and welcome to the Odd Years podcast. It's an odd-numbered year, which means that national elections are on a hiatus, but the issues, trends, and personalities that impact electoral politics are always in sight. This week, we talk with Mark Z. Barabak, a columnist for the LA Times, about his series, The New West, which explores the forces that turn once reliably Republican states like Arizona, Colorado, and Nevada blue and purple. We also discuss what other changes are likely in this diverse and rapidly growing part of the country. And for you demography nerds, we dropped the term diaspora a few times too. Not only is Mark an incredibly talented political journalist who is one of the most respected among his colleagues, but he lives in and loves the West like few I know. Here's our conversation that was recorded on September 26th. Mark Z. Barabak, hello. Welcome to the Odd Years.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Of course. So here's what we're going to do today. We are diving deep into the series you're writing for the LA Times called The New West, where you explore the reasons behind the shift in political affiliation of key states in the West, which you say has redrawn the national political map and scrambled the race for the White House. And this shift you're talking about is the shift really over the last 20 or so years. If you look back 20 years ago, it's 2004 presidential election. George W. Bush wins Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. And 20 years later, well, not quite 20 years, 16 years later, Democrats win all four of those states, Colorado pretty much and New Mexico in the solid blue category. Nevada, slight tinge of blue, has been in the Democratic column since 2008 at the presidential level. Arizona, a true toss-up. So what happened?
Well, there are commonalities across the region, and we can go into those, and there are different things that happen in each of the states. So some of the commonalities, and let me go back. I want to add that Oregon in 2004, hard to believe, was very, very competitive. I remember campaigning, that's part of the origin of this series. I remember campaigning with W. Bush, covering George W. Bush, not campaigning with him, covering him, what he campaigned. And no one said, wow, what is George W. Bush doing in Portland? Is he crazy? In fact, hard to believe, but Portland was one of the top advertising markets in the 2004 campaign. So add that to the list.
Yep.
Since then, it's been lights up. Okay, so what's happened? So again, some commonalities across the region, starting with the Republican Party that has turned very rightward. There's become very much a white Christian Southern dominated party. That hasn't played particularly well out West. You know, there's a conservatism of more than there's a libertarianism. You know, it's the old, just back off. Don't get in my face. So even before the Dobbs decision, abortion, that issue really hurt Republicans out here. State parties in places like Oregon, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico have all gotten very, very right-wing, Trumpy. I mean, a lot of this stuff was taking place even before Donald Trump shows up on the scene. The rise of the Latino vote, starting in California, we saw it with Prop 187, and they just sort of moved from California eastward. That's sort of the conceit we have here in California, that all important trends start here and spread east. So the increase of the Latino vote, an energized Latino vote, folks turning out larger number. The sorting that has been written about so much, folks moving to cities. You know, there's a misapprehension. There's sort of this mythos of the West as a place of, cowboys and barbed wire and wide open spaces. And all that is true. But the West is actually the most urban part of the country. More people live in cities in the West than anywhere else in the country. Cities, as you and as our listeners certainly know, tend to vote Democratic. So you have those broad sweeping changes across the region. And then if you want, we can get into individuals in the case of Nevada and California and individual factors in each of these states.
I am old enough to remember too, Mark, when the mayor of Boulder, Colorado, was actually a Republican. that the race for the district in and around Portland and those suburbs around Portland was considered a toss-up. So yes, you've seen, as you said, the city's changing, but also the suburbs around those cities changing. And how much of that, as you said, is about the cultural issue piece, and how much of that is about the kinds of people who moved into those states? These are all fast-growing states. And what have you found when it comes to the sort of, I don't know if we call them expats or people who've moved in, but have they changed what it meant to be an Oregonian, what it meant to be an Arizonan, et cetera?
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you brought up the suburbs because that really is a key part of it, especially in places like Arizona. If you want to look at Joe Biden's very, very narrow victory there, it was Maricopa County, right? Suburban, Phoenix and its sprawling metro area, 60% of the electorate flipped from Hillary Clinton to Biden. Biden became the first Democrat to carry it actually since Harry Truman. So yeah, a big part of this story is the suburbs. And the Oregon piece, I led with a couple. I mean, they moved from California some years back, but they lived in Irvine and they moved up there to be a part of the growing tech industry. And that piece I centered in Washington County, which was traditionally a Republican part of Oregon. You're nodding your head as you and other folks know. Joe Biden won that, and they won it because of people like the Packers. That's the name of the couple who moved in. And that's a big part of it as well. You have a lot of folks moving from California who are moving to places like Nevada, particularly Washoe County. Again, used to be Republican. Now it's a coin flip. Very, very close. Maricopa County, parts of Colorado, I mean, all across the West. And you also have folks from the Midwest moving into Arizona in particular. So yeah, it's very much a story of movement, of people coming. It's that sorting that folks have talked about, people moving to these places and other people following them because they want to live by people who are politically like-minded.
So is this really a story? You're based in California, obviously. Is this a story about how this really comes back to a California diaspora story? That, it's a story that many people, the sort of conventional wisdom is everybody's moving out of California and they took their California politics and now they're spreading it all across the West.
That's a part of it. It's a meaningful part of it, but it's not the only story there. I mean, let's talk about Nevada. I went to Nevada. I went to Vegas. I wrote about that. Yes, there are people, as I mentioned, who are moving to places like Washoe County, but Nevada is one of these places where really one individual made a huge difference. Right. Of course, Harry Reid, former Senate Majority Leader. For him, it was the old. What's the old thing? Mother of invention, necessity. I mean, the bottom line is Harry Reid almost lost, came really, really close in 1998 to losing, had this near-death experience. And as a result, took over the state Democratic Party, which was kind of a joke, turned it into this political juggernaut, brought the caucuses to Nevada in 2008, which had a huge effect on party building, enormous, in fact, indispensable help from the culinary union, super powerful union. So yes, the California diaspora, if you will, is a part of it. But in the case of Nevada, very much one individual, Harry Reid, with huge help from organized labor.
We're going to get in the weeds here a little bit on Nevada. And of course, our listeners love the weeds. So let's talk about that Harry Reid machine for a minute, because as you pointed out, it was almost a force of will. And that you write about, that Harry Reid says, we're not going to lose again. I'm going to build the biggest, best, basically machine to turn out our voters. And he passed away a couple of years ago. And ever since then, there's been this conversation about whether, without Harry Reid there, the Democrats are going to be able to continue to keep this machine running. We know after the 2020 election, for example, the state party was basically taken over by Bernie Sanders alums and acolytes. Now it's back in the hands of the so-called establishment. The Reid machine is dispersed. So how long can the personality basically, or maybe a better way of saying it is, can the Reid machine continue to dominate the longer that Harry Reid person is no longer in the picture?
Yeah, good question. I've spoken to people who are cogs, if you will, in the Reid machine. And, they praise Harry Reid to the skies and say what a great guy he was, brilliant, master tactician. But they also say Harry Reid was realistic enough to know that Harry Reid wasn't going to live forever. So he purposely, they say, laid the groundwork, built a machine that can keep up and running without him. And we saw they did come through in this last Senate election, reelected Cortez Masto, the incumbent Democrat. Close race, tough race, but she won it. We'll know better in 2024, 2024. We'll know 24. Yes. My mind is on when the series started, 2024. So we'll know more. It's a very good question. The thing that they don't have, the Reid Machine does not have, is that enormous fundraising cloud that Harry Reid enjoyed. I mean, they could do whatever they wanted. They could fund everything. I mean, millions and millions of dollars pouring into the state Democratic Party at that time. So I'm trying to think of what metaphor I want to use. The Reid Machine is up and running. If money is the gas or the fuel that's running it, how long is that going to keep coming in to keep the machine running? That's a big question.
Right. Although as long as it's a presidential battleground, I guess the money will come in during that presidential year. But to your point, needs to be coming in constantly, right? You can't just fill the car up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once.
And I want to give due credit, to the culinary union, because they're really important. I mean, the culinary union and base is fascinating. I mean, we're seeing sort of this labor resurgence, with the writers' strike, what's going on. Who knows how the auto worker strike is going to come up. But Nevada still is, Las Vegas especially, still is that kind of America that existed before you and I were born, frankly, where, you could have a high school degree, no more, and, buy a house, put your kids through college, all that stuff. That's very much owing to the unique nature of the Vegas economy and the power of culinary, and as long as culinary is there, that goes a long way toward, putting gas in that Reid Machine.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And what's so fascinating about Nevada too is, the challenge here for Republicans, it used to be, oh boy, we got to we're going to lose Clark County, which is Las Vegas. But if we keep it close enough and we win in the rural areas, and as you pointed out, Washoe County, which is up in Reno, we can win the state. But now it's like whack-a-mole, where Republicans have to continue to try to keep somewhat competitive in Clark. But now Washoe is going also more Democratic than it was in the past.
Yeah. The thing about Nevada, though, the thing that keeps Nevada competitive is, I was referring to these, we'll call them blue collar or non-college graduate. Nevada has a very, very significant percentage of them. And as you and the folks watching this know, right, that's been one of the big divides in our politics these days is folks, college degree or less voting Republican. And so that's what keeps Nevada competitive. I mean, Democrats have all these advantages we're talking about, but still a very substantial portion of non-college educated folks who work, who work in they like to call the gaming industry. So we'll go with that, who work in the gaming industry, who work in the entertainment industry. That's what's keeping Nevada very, very competitive, along with the fact that, we've seen Republicans making inroads among Latinos, as we call them, California, Hispanics elsewhere, those blue collar types. So that's also keeping Nevada competitive.
Well, thank you for my transition. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the Odd Years podcast. We hope you're enjoying these interviews, and we need your help. One of the best ways to support our podcast is by leaving a review on your favorite platform. Just a few words about what you like about the show. Your review not only helps us know what we're doing right, but it also helps other people find the Odd Years. Speaking of helping other listeners find the Odd Years, please share your favorite episode with someone you think might enjoy these conversations. On behalf of our team, thank you for your support. Because that's what I wanted to talk to you about, too, about how important Latinos are to Democrat success. So 2020, Biden does 9 points worse than Hillary Clinton among Latinos in Nevada, 6 points worse than Clinton did in Arizona. And in talking to folks for your stories in Nevada, I know Arizona's coming out soon. What are folks in those states telling you about the Latino vote and whether or not this dip that we saw between Clinton and Biden, whether that was a one-off or whether they think that that's actually going to continue to be a trend line that could help Republicans come back and win a state like Nevada and hold on to Arizona?
I think Democrats are very concerned about it. They're very concerned. They want to see to it, if they can, make it a one-time blip as opposed to a pattern. Because you're right, that's a very, very important part of the Democratic base. A big part of this transition has been Latino voters. And Democrats I've spoken with and some folks who specialize in Latino voters say it's a real problem that Democrats have. A lot of it is grounded in economics. A lot of it is grounded in culture. For shorthand purposes, we'll talk about the woke stuff, quote, quote, the Latinx stuff, quote, quote, doesn't play real well, particularly with a lot of older male Latinos. So Democrats are mindful this is a problem and it's something they're going to have to focus on.
And yet, and some of the issues too, I know in looking back at the 2022 elections, there's been some really good research there by some of these more progressive groups on what worked and what didn't with Latino voters. Interestingly enough, as you pointed out, the conversations about even about immigration or about the fight for democracy being at stake, those didn't move those swing voters in the same way that issues about who's looking out for me and my family and abortion access did. So I think we have a lot of assumptions. Those folks who've been working in politics for a long time about like, who are Latino voters? What's going to motivate them? What happens when all these young Latino voters come into the voting age population? And I think we're now starting to finally recognize that it's more complicated than we've been sort of led to believe.
Yeah, the first thing folks who specialize in Latino vote will tell you is there is no Latino vote. Latinos are different everywhere. I mean, we haven't talked about Texas, which is a place I want to venture eventually, because, you look at all the factors that have shaded the West blue, Latino voters, big cities, party that's gone way far to the right. All those things are taking place in Texas, which obviously has not flipped. Why? Well, part of it is because Latinos in Texas are so different than Latinos, say, in California and other places. So there is that tendency to sort of, speak in the broad brush of Latinos when you're right. Older Latinos are different than younger or blue collar. It's like any other constituency.
Here is my other big arching question. You said you wanted to move into Texas. My question is, why states where we're also seeing an influx of new people, fast growing states, Idaho, Utah, Montana, why those states have stayed reliably red while the Colorados and Nevadas, the states around them have gone blue?
That's a good question. And I mean, I would have to go to really feel comfortable answering it. I would want to spend some time on the ground there. My supposition is that it's part of that sorting that's taking place. I mean, a lot of the folks who are moving to places like Iowa and Utah and Montana because they feel culturally and politically more comfortable there. Right. So I think it's part of this. I think it's part of this. All those states you mentioned have, not insubstantial Latino populations, but certainly not as large as some of these other states. I think that may be part of it as well. But I think a big part of it is just cultural, like choosing to move and live near like.
Yeah. And in the case of Utah, you have a Salt Lake City, which is pretty liberal and has been electing progressive mayors for quite some time. But you get outside of Salt Lake City, there you go. Boise is attracting a lot of tech and is now the sort of new affordable part of the West. And I'm wondering, and you spent time in Bend, Oregon, we're starting to see in this new post-COVID economy, more and more people who say, I can work from anywhere. Why don't I'm going to go live near Tahoe, so I'll live in Reno, or I want to live near Bachelor, so I'm going to go live in Bend. And how much has that, I don't get to use the word diaspora very often, so I'm going to use it a lot now because it's a great word and we don't get to use it. So this, again, diaspora,
of workers who can work from anywhere who are saying, if I can work from anywhere, I want to work from a beautiful place where I can also do cool outdoor stuff. And that ultimately enough of them move there that they change the makeup? Or does it take more than just, some keyboard warriors moving to one city in a state to make meaningful change?
No, I think, and I'm just going to say diaspora because I want to say it too.
This isn't a good word.
Yes,
yeah.
Diaspora. Again, that's a part of it. And it's funny you mentioned Ben because, part of the change that took place in Oregon is exactly what you're talking about. I mean, Bend used to be, I think it's a small, sleepy, forgive the cliche, place that's become sort of this outdoor mecca and it drawn a lot of people, a lot of Californians, a lot of people who can, as you suggest, work from anywhere. And, the story behind Oregon was to me particularly interesting because, part of that was an economic transformation, right? I got a quote here I want to dig up. I want to give him due justice. It was Bill Lunch. He's a longtime emeritus political science professor. He said, employment patterns have political consequences. And you sure see that in Oregon. I mean, yeah. Oregon was a state that traditionally was relying on extractive industries, timber being among them. And then all of a sudden you had this transformation to two things, a tech economy, as you mentioned, and then this whole industry built up around leisure and outdoors and hiking and this notion that, instead of chopping down trees, people want to hike around them. And so Nike is there and Columbia Sportswear.
Yeah.
And what does that do? Brings in a lot of folks from places like California, but elsewhere, people who are very environmental minded, tend to vote Democratic because of the parties and the way they line up environmental issues. And also, interestingly, education became a really big issue, right? Tech wants people who are educated. Democrats became seen as the party that's more supportive of education. So, in the case of Oregon, you had sort of this economic transformation that led to the political change.
And Colorado, a little bit of the same that you write about that. This is the state that has more college graduates than per capita than any other, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very highly educated state. Again, very, very environmental minded. What happened in Colorado that's interesting to me is, and sort of illustrates the direction the parties have taken. The Colorado Republican Party has now been taken over by a Trumpy election denier kind of guy, right? But Democrats over the last 20 or so years put up these governors and senators who are, seen as very, very moderate. You had a former DA who became the Democratic governor. You have Jared Polis, who arguably is more libertarian than Democratic. But, again, it goes to, I use this word advisedly, but I think it's really important in politics. It goes to branding. And in a place like Colorado, Democrats have been branded as sort of the centrist, more sensible party. And the Republicans have been kind of seen as the crazy party, which has been exacerbated under Donald Trump.
So the risk for Democrats in a state like Colorado is they could lose if they put the kind of candidate forward that is seen as just way, way too left, too out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say,
because go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I can't tell you how many conversations I had. I mean, one comes to mind when I was driving around Oregon with a local elected Democrat who was going on and on talking about crime and homelessness and how frustrated people are. I can't tell you how many people who, would burn down the house with grandma in it before they would vote for Donald Trump or Republican, right? These are dyed-in-the-wool Democrats who are saying, you know what? Crime's out of control. Homeless is out of control. Something has to happen. If there's something, and I think we're more likely to see it at the local level, starting with mayors, boards of supervisors, governors. Oregon, as you know, came very close to electing a Republican governor for the first time in forever. So yeah, that's the risk for Democrats is this backlash on issues like crime and homelessness, which really has a lot of people, Democrats among them, just fed up.
And that if maybe Donald Trump is no longer in the picture, this becomes an easier thing for Republicans to be able to keep the focus on the issue rather than having to talk about Donald Trump and the issue.
100%. I mean, anyone who wants to read any of my columns will know what I say about Donald Trump. So I will simply take it from the perspective of what I feel has been harmful to the Republican Party. And let me just state here, I'm all for a two-party system, right? Competitive, checks and balances, all that good stuff, right? I think one of the great detriments of Donald Trump to the Republican Party has been that's all Democrats have to say. Yes, there are people sleeping on your sidewalk, and yes, this is the problem. Donald Trump, MAGA.
Right. And that's some point voters are going to go, okay, I get it. We don't like Donald Trump. But here's the thing. I also don't like that there doesn't seem to be any solution to crime or homelessness. And it's been, dragging on now for far too long. Although Los Angeles was going to be another place where that issue was going to potentially allow a former Republican to win a race for mayor, and that did not work either.
No.
Yeah.
No. And they obviously threw down, the MAGA card. Yeah. I don't know how important that was, but at the end of the day, it's basic math. More Democrats and Republicans in a place like LA.
Right.
We'll be right back with more from The Odd Years. The Odd Years is brought to you by the Cook Political Report team. It's our way of sharing the questions we love to ask and the conversations we enjoy having behind the scenes. If you'd like to explore more of what we have to offer, consider subscribing at cookpolitical.com/subscribe. Odd Years listeners can use the discount code ODD10, the number 10 that is, to save 10% on any subscription. This offer is available only to new subscribers.
Trying to think through the next election in 2024, Mark. These are all places. Well, first of all, I want to travel to all these places just because they're some of the most beautiful on earth. But Arizona is going to be a place where a lot of action is going to happen. And what do you see really as the key here as we are going to, drill down into every single, event? Or maybe let me start by saying, in Arizona, what do you think really the key is to determining whether Democrats keep hold of it once again in this presidential, or whether Donald Trump can win a state that he carried in 2016 but lost in 2020?
Yeah, and carried it in 2016 with less than 50% of the vote. I mean, yes. Arizona has always been really tough state. I mean, I've been having this conversation actually with a lot of folks on Arizona now. And you kind of get, I want to be clear. I'm not smart enough to make predictions. So I never make any predictions. And one thing I should say is, like they say when you invest like in a mutual fund or whatever, like past performance is no guarantor, right? Past performance is no guarantor of future result, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Arizona agreed. It's going to be one of the handful of super competitive states. What's it going to come down to? Folks I talk to, talk about with Trump as the Republican nominee running against Biden or without Trump. I don't have to tell you that Republicans feel much, much better. These are, to be clear, your establishment, political analysty types, not your MAGA diehard Trump people. So to be clear. But, they think, someone said to me that, the best thing Joe Biden could have going for him would be Donald Trump. And conversely, the best thing that Trump has going for him is Joe Biden. What's a big part of it? Inflation, gas prices. They're cheaper in Arizona. I went for my run this morning, and gas prices in California, Northern California, are pushing $6 a gallon. Not going to put California in play, but it's a really, really big deal.
Yeah.
So if you're a Democrat, how do you win Arizona? They need to do what they did last time. They're going to need to carry the suburbs. They're going to need to have a very, very robust Latino turnout. An unsung and underappreciated thing. And, when you win a state by 10,500, I think it's 10,597 or whatever votes, less than 11,000, a lot of things matter. Huge, huge turnout among Native Americans in 2020. So, Democrats, Biden just barely won. It's one of these things where they have to do everything right to win it again.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're going to see in terms of that margin in 2024. Mark, one thing we like to end our interviews with, that we ask all of our interviewees, is to tell us about first elected official that you interacted with. Now, this doesn't have to be somebody that you covered. It doesn't have to be in your official capacity as a journalist, or it could be, but the one that really sticks with you.
Wow. The first, and do they have to be elected? Because I can go back and I can tell you the first candidate I covered. He wasn't elected at the time.
Please.
The
Anybody that's in that sort of political world universe.
Well, okay. So when I was 16 years old and already decided that I was going to squander my life by becoming a newspaper reporter, I was the editor of my high school paper in Oakland, California. And I decided as editor that we were going to cover the Oakland mayor's race, right? For our audience of students, none of whom could vote, but why not? I'm the editor. I can do what I want. And I chose to cover the front runner because I was editor. I could. A gentleman by the name of Lionel J. Wilson, who's a Superior Court judge. The Oakland Airport is now named after him. He became the first Black mayor in Oakland history. So 16 years old, I went out and covered the Lionel J. Wilson mayoral campaign. And now, and here I am all these way too many years later, flying out whenever I do my little trips around the West or wherever, flying out of Lionel J. Wilson Airport.
That is a great connection. Now, was Ron Dellums ever the mayor? Did he run?
Yeah, Ron Dellums. Yes, Ron Dellums followed. Yeah, there were a handful after. Yes, Ron Dellums went from Congress, where you probably covered him, to mayor. I'm going to pen real quick into the conversation. I feel super lucky in my career. I mean, I've covered people like Nancy Pelosi. I mean, from the ground up, from her very first run for Congress. I've covered Dianne Feinstein. I mean, I remember when she was mayor being called into her office in City Hall and being scolded. Obama, Hillary Clinton. I mean, I've been super lucky to cover some really, really fascinating people, and people, particularly the Pelosi's and Feinsteins, really, really closely, up close and personally. It's been fascinating. It's been fun.
So were you surprised by the Pelosi decision to stay around for another term?
Yeah and no. I mean, a little bit. Yes, I will admit I was surprised. I thought when she stepped down from the speakership, she would leave Congress and be done. That surprised me. I think it makes a little bit of sense for her to stick around only because she can raise a ton of money still and is. I mean, I've heard people suggest, and I don't know, that she'll get reelected and then maybe step down right afterwards, special election, maybe see if she could give a leg up to her daughter, Christine, who would like to be elected. That's some speculation. So I guess I was a little bit surprised, but then when I thought about it, it makes sense for her to stick around and do what she can to try and win back the House one more time.
One more time. Although, boy, what to say you're going to stick around for one more term. And if you're still feeling healthy, what's to say, go for another 2 years?
You know what? I think as long as Nancy Pelosi draws a breath, she'll be reelected in San Francisco. Right. I mean, she's really an institution, Coit Tower, the Golden Gate Bridge, the 49ers, Nancy Pelosi.
All are what San Francisco is known for. Mark Barabak, this is fantastic. Your series has been so good and important. And I want to be spending a lot more time out west, as I said, especially Arizona and Nevada, which are key battleground states, but understanding the shift in those states like Colorado, like Oregon, like California even, over these last 20 years tells us a lot about our moment that we're living in right now. So really, really love the work you're doing. And thank you.
Well, thank you. And come out when you do. Bring your mountain bike. We'll go for a ride.
I know. We'll go to Bend. I've never been there.
Yeah. Oh, there's amazing trails. I go, because my brother-in-law lives there. So I go there and I mean, they have, it's like a ski resort. They have them rated. There's like greens, blues, and blacks. I mean, it was an incredible network that goes on forever.
Okay. Well, as you know, and the older I get, the more that green is the only color I do. Same with my skiing. I'm all about the greens. I enjoy the outdoor part. I can't, I can't break anything or rip anything. So
Well, we've reached that point in the year where the days are getting shorter, the leaves are changing color, and retailers are sporting Christmas decorations. It also means we're coming to the end of season 1 of The Odd Years. Thanks to the positive feedback we received for this podcast, we're going to keep it going, but with a twist. Season 2, which will take place during an even-numbered year, of course, will feature opportunities for you to ask questions of our fantastic Cook Political Report team, including David Wasserman and Jessica Taylor. Stay tuned for more information on where Odd Years listeners can submit questions. Until next time, thanks for listening. The Odd Years is brought to you by the Cook Political Report and is produced by Ali Slane and Catherine Hale, with podcast editing and sound design by Kate Wecker of Sonic Hook Creations.